I want to open the second meeting of the Davis County Confederate Statue Relocation Committee. I see that all of our committee members, Kenny Barr, Tim Klein, and Dameron, and Wesley Acton are all here today. And we want to welcome not only our members, but those of you who are following us on Facebook. The first thing that we probably need to do is to approve our minutes from the last meeting before we get into anything else.
I so move.
Okay, Anne has moved that we approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Wesley Acton. All those in favor of approving last week's meeting, please say yes or raise your hand.
Yes.
Okay, Wesley, okay. The minutes have been approved and will be filed. Jordan is keeping all of these records, so there will be a record of everything we do and say kept at the courthouse. Before we have the judge and the county attorney talk, I just want to kind of go over the ground rules again and reaffirm the importance of us having a united front and to reaffirm our charge. We all have a copy of Resolution 2020, and I don't see the need to read the whole thing, but it says the committee shall provide a recommended location to the Davis County Fiscal Court within 6 months. That is our charge. That is our only charge, is to listen to the public, consider their thoughts on this issue, and come up with a recommendation which we will take to the county court and for their approval. And you will remember we established as ground rules civility, cooperation, community, and consensus. And we just need to be absolutely sure that our goal is clear, and we need to make clear to the public that the decision has been made. The statue will be moved. And so when comments come in saying don't move it, those are just automatically disregarded. We do not need to keep those or look at those because that ship has sailed. We are now working on where we are going to put it. I think we have Judge Executive Al Mattingly online here. If you want to make your comments, Mr. Mattingly, Judge Mattingly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I came back. Apparently, I got off too soon last week, and I probably could have answered some questions and avoided a lot of confusion, I guess. I know there were some questions regarding the statements that I had made prior to the vote on 2020. And I think, Kenny, I hope that I answered your question, your concern there. Again, as I said, it was a 4-0 vote by the commission to move the statue. There was also a question regarding the need to establish ownership. Well, that's not part of the charge. The ownership, the county claims ownership. There was a question regarding some statements under Resolution 18-2020, where we had referenced the daughters owning it. Well, and for those who don't know, at that time, I think it was sometimes in June. Yeah, it was in June because it was prior to a meeting in July. I had been in contact with the Daughters of the Confederacy. I'd been in contact with NAACP, and we had worked out an agreement with the Daughters of the Confederacy to move the statue out on 431, a piece of ground that they had. To facilitate that, hey, I'm trying to dampen down community, I guess a lot of I'm trying to think the right word, a lot of concern in the community. So, and the NAACP had signed off on it. So when you have two sides who have, I thought, golden standard, but apparently it wasn't. Before our meeting, the daughters withdrew their proposal because they'd been approached by another group and said, let's put it on Frederica Street, a block away from Senior High. Well, in my opinion, that was like giving the community a middle finger. not only the community a middle finger, it was like giving the African American community a middle finger, because that's where the majority of African American students go, and that wasn't suitable. We delayed making any decisions, and moved forward. The commission, after consultation, after some reading, after looking at comments, decided that it was time to move the statute. It's the only charge that this committee has, the only charge. If you want to go outside of the committee on your own, if you want to request information from the county, and I promise you, you don't have to make an open records request. I'll give you whatever information that we have, but I can tell you it's very sketchy. I'm not sure if Jordan sent you the 1893 resolution. If he did, you see where the fiscal court said that the Union side and the Confederate side could each have a 15-foot by 15-foot square to put a statue. The Confederates did it. The Union chose not to do it. That was 120 years ago. There was a question concerning a claim that another group of people had maintained the statue. I absolutely said no tax money had been spent on maintaining the statue, and there has been none. The court facilitated a group of citizens, I believe it was back in 1990 in that area, to move the statue off the base, take it to, I think it was Owensboro Cemetery. Alan Harrell and his folks did it. And then once it was cleaned, to bring it back and set it. The only monies, the court did spend monies in maintaining the area around the statue. To my knowledge, we have not and cannot find a record of any monies being spent by anybody else to maintain it. There was a claim that a group had paid taxes on it. Well, that group is a 503c corporation, not for profit. They don't pay taxes. So I don't know who they were paying the taxes to, but let me tell you, some other local government must have got that money, because I ain't seen a nickel of it. So there were a lot of concerns. There is a court case in Louisville where the same group claimed ownership of the statue. A lawsuit was filed by those folks, as well as the Sons of Confederate Veterans, claiming ownership of the statue. They lost that court case. There was, the statue was named the Historical Markers Program, and there's a very pertinent question there. It asked who owns the statue, and the answer was the public. Davis County Fiscal Court is the public's representative. So if you have questions about the ownership, if you can't accept the charge, then I would suggest you perhaps need to resign from the commission and work to establish that ownership. But your charge is not to establish ownership. Your charge is to evaluate, and Kenny, I heard you talking in terms of the procedure, and I hope we get as many, I think you said 6, 10 or whatever. I hope we get that many recommendations. But your charge is to evaluate those recommendations and bring 1 or 2 or the best 3, however many you think is fit, to fiscal court. Once you've done that, then fiscal court will make a decision. I got an email from a guy who said, why in the world are we having 5 citizens work this hard to determine where the statue should go when you have 4 highly paid members? And I don't know what he considers highly paid. I think all of us, for what we go through, would contest that. Tim, I see you grinning. Who should be making that decision ourselves? Well, I'll tell you, it's very simple. This is a community issue, as we talked about last week. It's an emotionally charged issue, and it's a way that we thought as fiscal court best to involve the community, to use you guys as a filter to bring those things to us. So, I'm happy to talk to any of you about anything else. If you want something, call me up. But I suggest that anything the committee does should be done within the committee and not outside of the committee. But I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'll answer your questions. I've been very open and forthright with the community when they have asked questions. Be happy to give you anything that I've got, I can find. And that's about it. I just wanted to come back and reaffirm what Aloma said. Your charge is one thing and one thing only: involve the community and bring to us a recommendation. So Aloma, with that, I'm done.
I have a
Thank
question.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody have a
Okay.
question?
Yes.
Who is going to pay to move the statue?
There is a group of private citizens, and therefore I don't know who they are, but I was approached by a group that said that they would put the money up to move the statue. Now, I thought that pretty bold of them, man, when they don't know what the cost is. I've got an estimated cost of about $10,000. And I say that because a crane that would be of sufficient size to move the statue, it's not the statue, that's 1,100 pounds. Base is 16,500
Wow.
as per a 1900 Messenger Enquirer newspaper article. But I know Jake Mulligan is on here. Who can believe the Messenger and what they print? So it may be more, it may be less. Get that look off your face, Aloma. So that's, a crane that would lift something like that, Ann, is about $4,300 a day.
Yes, I know cranes.
Yeah, yes, you do. That's exactly right. Now, the cost, there's going to be some ancillary costs. You certainly can't move 16,500 pounds and put it on the ground. So you're going to have to prepare a base. And if you do it right and prepare a concrete base that's thick enough to handle that, you're probably got another couple $1,000. So $6,500, and that leaves us $3,500 to pick up things that we don't know what the cost might be. But we determined as a court that no taxpayer dollars be involved in the move.
Right.
Any other questions while I'm here?
No, but I would like to make a statement if the committee would agree to it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't know that I would have accepted a position on this committee if I had known that it was an absolutely final judgment that the committee would be removed, because I did not understand that from things that had been in the newspaper. My fault. And it is because of my family history. I thought I could bring another dimension to the committee about the history from the other side. And I will be happy to share that with you or not, whatever you prefer. And so I would say that I am probably going to be hard to convince to move the statue because of my family history.
Clay, and I'm sorry to hear that. I am sorry that wasn't explained to you up front, or there wasn't any questions. But if you have an issue with moving the statue, my suggestion would be that you would resign from the committee so someone could be appointed. And I'll be disappointed that you're gone because I know you. I've known your husband. I know, but it's not in the purview of this committee to decide whether or not that statue moves. That decision's been made by fiscal court.
I understand that.
Your decision, and I hate to lose your expertise and your point of view, but certainly I would hate to see you serve on a committee that was really eating at your insides.
Well, it's not eating at my insides, but I think we all have our own convictions. And if I may, I would like to share my story.
Give me a call tomorrow and you may.
Oh, you don't want it public?
I don't mind. Here, Jacob Mulligan with the Messenger and Enquirer would be happy to call you, but your story is not germane to what this committee has been.
Okay, all right.
That's where I got. But Jacob Mulligan, I know you're on here. You call Ann Dameron, and if you want, I will be happy to give him your phone number, and you can tell him your story.
Whatever,
Okay, sure.
Okay.
If I may, I would just like to appeal to Ann to stay on for one reason. Yes, the thing's going to move. That to me was clear in the resolution. And personally, I have no problem with that. I'm a transplanted Yankee, and a lot of my family came over from Europe after World War II. So I don't have that connection, but it's going to move. And I guess what my appeal to Ann would be, you know, we need the voice of that side of the issue. And, you know, we need to understand the goal here would be to find a place, you know, and I still think the ownership issue is an issue, and then we can talk about that some later. But, you know, I'm going to assume for now the county owns it. If the county owns it, it'd be great to put it at a place where we could, to the best of our ability, represent the wishes and interests of the various stakeholders in our community. And I think Ann is one of those stakeholders, and I think she represents people who are. So that's just my 2 cents. I mean, Ann, if you feel like you need to step down, by all means, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
I really,
I'm sorry, Ann, but Tim, you said that much more eloquently than I attempted to do. And I agree. That's one of the reasons that we didn't appoint just one person. We want those diverse opinions, but at the same time, all working toward the one thing that the court tasked you to do, which is to move the statue or find the most suitable place. And your voice, as I said, I'm sorry, or would be sorry to lose you, but I certainly understand. So.
Yeah, well, and we would, I think this is something that your conscience will have to decide, but we do value you on the committee, and we're getting a lot of responses. I have one that I will share with you all later from a woman who is president of the local, I believe, Daughters of the Confederacy, and she came up with a very good where she would like to see it go. And
okay.
I have asked her to let me know if that represents the chapter or if that's her personal viewpoint. But I think all of us agree that it is a statue that needs to be saved. I don't think that's ever been debated. We think it needs to be somewhere off of public property, somewhere where that people can see it, perhaps in context. And I think many of us had relatives on both sides of that war, but the war's over, the 1900s are over, and we have to move on. So you will have to make the decision, but we would hate to lose you.
Well, I have another feeling. I don't want it to be put in a place where it could easily be destroyed. And I think.
No, I agree. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. And I'm
Yes, ma'am.
not in favor of rewriting history. It is what it is. If for nothing else, it's standing there to remind us, don't do that anymore, you know?
Well, and that's the argument that I used for many years. So
And
no,
Ann,
I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
And I have shared that feeling. We wanted somewhere where it will be safe. I believe, I hope that's what the whole committee believes.
Let me tell you, that's exactly the argument that I've used since I was elected Judge Executive at Loma. And I sat in my office in a meeting with the NAACP and with several other members, and we talked in those terms. So I understand where you're coming from. But anyway, that the fiscal court was pretty clear in what they wanted to do and what they wanted done. So I think that's the direction that this committee needs to go. Claude, I know you're on there. I'm not sure if you had anything to add. I know that you are on family court duty, and sometimes that runs until midnight. Tim, you might get called in to step in and help him out. But anyway, so I'm gonna, unless you have any other questions for me, if I can clarify anything on behalf of the court, I would remind you too that we had charged this committee. You can have other folks come in and present to you, if you recall that. Other folks, if you had, like the lady that you were talking about, Aloma, if you had wanted her to come before and talk about it, that would be fine. So anyway, I'm going to get off. I've got to try to figure out what's going on because I've got a meeting with Osborne and Stivers in the morning on Zoom, and I want them to suffer and have to look at my face.
Okay, we'll go get it fixed. Thank you very much, Judge. I think you have clarified some things.
Thanks.
Claude, if you have any comments.
Well, I'm not sure. I think the judge basically covered the things that I had planned to do. The There was a resolution in 1893. It was put up sometime in the early 20th century. All that was permitted by court. The court has maintained those grounds since that time. We did, as the judge mentioned, have a private individual take the statue itself and restore it. That was a contribution, and the moving and return was also a contribution by others, as the judges arranged, or the fiscal court has arranged this time. As far as I know, up until we decided to move it, no one else has either claimed ownership nor provided any help to either restore or maintain it since it was erected. And as the judge mentioned, it received the historical marker designation. In that application, the ownership was listed and designated as the public. It wasn't fiscal court, but just as public.
Well, do you know who filled that application out?
I think the Daughters of the the United Daughters of the Confederacy filled it out.
Okay, the one I saw was filled out by somebody at the Kentucky Historical Society.
They may have done it. They were the ones that made the application, I think.
Yeah, that's where you apply to.
Okay, do we know that, or are you speculating on that?
No, I think they've claimed that. They were saying, well, they didn't know they had any other way of designating it. So that's, and that was I don't know if it was one of their members or someone who was acting on their behalf.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I hope we can put that particular matter to rest. I think it is not part of what we have to do. So we can.
It's attached to the fiscal court's property and has been for well more than 100 years, or
It's 100 years, yeah.
at least 100 years.
So it's your position that it's a fixture then?
It's an appurtenance, yeah. It's something that's attached to it, and I don't think you can gain a separate ownership of something like that. None of the other monuments are owned or claimed by anybody. They were all either erected with permission, or I think there may be at least one that was erected with a formal approval. Most of those were done just with the judge executive's permission. And I think the judge executive, as the chief executive officer of the county, has the authority to maintain the grounds and do whatever is necessary on the grounds itself. So
excuse me, I have a question, Claude, because for understanding, it's an appurtenance to
well, anything that's affixed to the land itself is something means it's become a part of that, or to something more dominant, if you will. So it's attached to the land. If you
monument or the statue, like the base or the statue, the monument, the statue can be easily removed, right?
The whole thing
not easily.
belongs to the county. We are not going to take committee time to keep hashing this over. This is a technique that we have got a lot of work to do, folks.
I have a pertinent question though, because I caught that word.
Okay.
Does that mean it has to be on county property?
No.
If it's moved, does that mean because it's an appurtenance to county property, does it have to be on some type of county property?
No.
I said it's appurtenant because it is attached to county property now. If it's moved, it becomes an attachment or appurtenant to the property to which
Okay. Okay. Just clarification.
Okay.
Anything else, Claude?
Not unless you all do it. Well, I would note that we've insured it. It's been part of our insurance or anything a part of that. So in that sense, we believe, or we have it's maintained. And as the judge mentioned, the lawsuit in Jefferson County had a similar kind of statute with similar basis, and that was the determination they made based upon the same sort of factors.
And everybody was sent a copy of that lawsuit. So I assume you all have all read it. And if you have any questions about it, this might be the time to ask, but that was a fairly recent lawsuit. Okay, thank you, Claude.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Enjoy.
Thanks. We got a lot of work to do today, folks. We need to talk about our action plan, how we're going to proceed. Last time was just a let's all get to know each other call. This is a hard working call. I want each of us to talk to people in the community and encourage everybody to send comments to the email, public comments@davisky.org. That That's where comments must come. And I think that we all in our daily life come in contact with people who have feelings one way or the other, and we do need to encourage them, because the important thing, and I think that's been emphasized today, is that we want to know what the community wants, where they want the statue moved, because ultimately we have to go through all those comments, and we will begin that today, and decide which ones have the most credence and why. I'm trying to encourage people not to just say, I want you to move it. That doesn't tell anything. We need to know where. Oh, I've got to plug my computer in because it's coming out. So y'all talk amongst yourself for about a minute.
So whenever we decide to move this, say we decide to move it to a museum or a cemetery, are we ultimately going to be asking for permission to give it away? I mean, it won't be Davis County's property anymore, right?
Well, yeah, wherever it goes, the owner of the property is going to have to agree to put it there.
Right.
Have you all been surprised about how few comments there have been?
I have been very surprised about how few. I've counted about 20. I've copied them all off so that we can talk about them today. I'm hoping after this meeting that people will be inspired to send us some more. I've made a tally, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get to comments of what people have suggested. Some of them have been very good, very feasible. For some, not so much. But ultimately, what we most want is the community to feel that as citizens, they have had a voice in this. And not everybody's going to be happy. And you are one of many people who do not. No, there are many people I've talked to who would rather it not be moved. It took me a while to really keep going over the history and looking at it through other eyes to decide that. It's a hard decision, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that I just want it protected. I don't know that I'm stuck.
I think that's very important, and I agree with you. There's one site that we will talk about that has concerned me because I could see some possibility of vandalism.
Mhm.
And I think as we make our recommendation, that's something we have to think about. Is this going to be where it will be safe? It is a work of art. It does
Absolutely
need to be protected. It just needs and will be moved. So
it's a valuable piece of art. It's a
yes,
valuable,
and I think
valuable
your
piece of
point of view is really going to be very important. I really do. The recommendation that we make to the court and what we're working on is getting to the point that we can write up a recommendation to send to them, and they will either vote it up or down. It would have to be really bad for them to vote it down. The judge just said today something that I hadn't really thought about, that we can give them 2 or 3 possibilities. I would like to see us certainly keep it narrowed down to no more than 2, but that's something we can talk about as we go along. I'm assuming that each of you are keeping up with the emails and reading the comments. I know Kenny has been because he responded to one of them. And at each meeting, we will go over the new comments that have come in, and I'm keeping a list. I'm copying all of them. I'm keeping a list of all of the comments and what their recommendations are, if they have a recommendation. Now, Kenny, you had suggested, how are we going to weed these down? How do we control them? Do you want to mention something about that now?
Yes. Let me get here. You know, I feel that we should look for a way to condense the options and ideas that are presented to us in a way that keeps the community in the process, like you referred to. You know, I believe the proposal that I'm submitting to the committee, and I sent an email out I'm sorry, but it was just maybe 20 minutes before the meeting. But, you know, it'll help us proceed in a diligent manner, but it will also allow the community to basically keep them in the loop. So basically what my proposal reads is, you know, setting a deadline to receive and review the initial proposals from the public so we can have a base to go by. And then once we have that deadline, of course, we're going to have to do some work. we're gonna have to look at these ideas and determine, the viability of each proposal, whether it's even acceptable by the person, there's a lot of talk about moving it to a cemetery, just for an example. Well, the cemetery has to accept it, but anyway, as we get that list constructed of all the proposals, then we can begin a discussion with the public input concerning only the proposals that have made the list, and until lasting till an established date on which a poll can be convened by the committee to narrow that list.
Yes.
So basically, each of these polling events, in my proposal, consists of the committee members picking their top, and this is just a, something to throw out there, the top 50% of the proposals on the list.
Mm-hmm.
The results will be tallied and the list will be narrowed down by 50% plus one. Example, if we have 10 proposals on the initial list for consideration, each member will vote on his or her top 5. The results will be tallied. The top 6 will move on for further consideration.
Mm-hmm.
The committee will then begin the new discussion with the public dealing with only those proposals.
Yes.
And then we'll, after a certain amount of time, I think a couple of weeks probably would be enough, but we would move on and do another polling event where we narrow it down again. And until we get down to, this will continue until 2 proposals remain, or there is a unanimous vote when there are 3 proposals left at the polling event. So basically, if we're down to 3 and everybody agrees, then we can stop there. If it don't, we still have 2 proposals, then we can discuss some more. And if we can't get a 4-1 or unanimous decision at that point, then we'll send 2 proposals to the fiscal court. Hopefully we can get it down to 1, but like you said, the ultimate goal would be 2 or less. This proposal is just an opening to a discussion. There's a lot of things we can modify, such as the polling on 50%. It could be 1/3.
Yes.
I believe this process will do the job of eliminating options so the public can then focus on the options left on the table, just like the option of leaving the monument at the courthouse where it is. The option is no longer available per Davis County Fiscal Court. So further discussion in that regard is pretty much useless. So will it be as we slowly eliminate other options that are presented to the committee.
Very well thought out. And what you're talking about is a timeline, which we need to establish, setting our timeline as to when we expect to do things. And we are going to get to that in just a very few minutes. But you have given it some good thought, and I like how you think. I think, for one thing, I think what you're saying and what I've been thinking, and the rest of you probably have too, is we can move this along faster. We're not committed to waiting until March. We can decide as a committee when we think the deadline should be, which is exactly what I believe you have said, and encourage the public, if we get it down to 2 or 3 things. When we go over in a few minutes, some of the things that have come in, there are a couple of things that are not realistic. So we can just sort of probably mark those off unless we suddenly get 50 people who want that particular thing. And I don't think so. So that's very good, because we want the public to feel that they're empowered. And I believe that the way you're talking about will do that, Kenny. Let me ask you all, when people do write in, do you want to respond? I know Kenny responded to one, I've responded to all of them. Do the rest of you, would you, if it's somebody you know, do you want to respond to them? Do you feel it's necessary for all of us to respond? What is your feeling on that?
I personally would love to respond to each one of them, especially if there's not going to be thousands. It looks like
Yeah.
It's doable right now.
Well, I appreciate that.
But what I did see, there was Jordan kind of explained to me how we received the public the emails from the public comments section. It makes it a little bit difficult to respond in a way that, it ain't difficult, but it takes a little bit of time to actually.
It does.
Attach each one of you into that email. And
Yeah.
I feel like that was the initial idea, was that everybody was supposed to be included. Maybe you I guess I haven't seen your responses, so Ms. New,
Well,
I'm sure you
and that's a
haven't.
good question, because I don't know how to do that. Jordan may have told me. I just sent the response back to, now I got a copy of yours, so obviously you figured it out. Jordan's going to have to help me figure out how to get my responses to everybody else. They're pretty simple. I can tell you what they were, but
Is anybody concerned that individual responses would try, whoever initiated the response, not us, but the people,
mhm.
and then they got individual responses from this committee, that they would try to pit a response against each other, that we're not presenting a unified response?
Well, that's the reason why I thought it might need to be respond in a conversation where everybody is included. Basically, you reply to all. But of course, if you reply to all in that public comment section, from what I understand, Jordan explained to me, is you're just responding straight back to public comments. Plus, each
No,
one
you
of
have to
us.
go to their email.
I guess my view would be that we all, to the extent we can send a polite response thanking them for their input, we should do it. But I wouldn't necessarily want to be in, email discussions with folks.
No. No,
about-
all I've done is say, thank you for your
Yeah,
remarks.
okay.
We're hearing from a lot of people about the same idea or something like that.
But no opinion or anything, no
opinion,
support.
because we do have to keep
Great,
a united front here. We need to
Absolutely.
know what everybody's doing.
absolutely.
I do think it's important that they hear back from us so that people do know that we're listening. And we could do this. Kenny, you and I could be the responders. Would that? I don't know that it's necessary for all 5 of us to respond to all of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but I mean, just what everybody decides.
Do we have a consensus, or we need to take a vote? Tell me what you want.
I
Do
agree,
you trust the 2 of us to respond?
absolutely.
Wesley?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Sorry.
then let's try that. And if we can figure out a way to copy the rest of the committee, that's a lot of emails, but then they could hear what we have said. Does that make sense, Kenny?
Yes.
I think so. Okay. Well, I will talk with Jordan about that. I am keeping a complete list, and as I said, I'm copying all the emails that come in, all the comments that come in, and keeping a tally. We all need to be doing that. Keep a tally of the suggestions. And it's not just their suggestion, but it's their reasoning. If I send a comment and say, I think it should go at X site, I need to tell why X site is good, not just because we're going to have to say that to the court. We've got to back up whatever we say with some facts and whether or not it is a viable position. So we need to make sure that that gets out to the public. And we do need to work on a timeline. I have worked up just a very small action plan, but I will need all of y'all's input to make this final. But for delivering the recommendation, first thing we do need to do is to have a timeline when we expect to do what. Normally, in other work I've done, if you have a timeline, you also list your goals, what it is that we're trying to do. Obviously, we only have the one goal, to come up with a viable place to move the statute. Then the next step is that we each read and keep a tally of not only the comments that come in, but conversations we have with people in the community. I've got a couple of emails that had come before we set up this site, and I will share those with you all today. Then we have to discuss these things at our meetings. We have to decide on the best and the most popular options and reasons. And then we have to try to reach consensus. And as Kenny has pointed out, we may not all decide on one thing. We may have two choices that we want to send to the court. That's certainly a possibility. And then our fifth step is to write the recommendation for presentation to the fiscal court. Now, are there other suggestions, other things that we need to be doing to accomplish what we want?
You may have said this alone, and I may have missed it, but did you say as part of that iterative process that we would need time to discuss with potential, property owners that, what kind of terms they would accept the statute on?
I think the court is doing that. I don't think that is not part of our job. The court, I know, has considered several things, and once we give our recommendation, then they will go to that entity
But
to
I
figure out.
think that's relevant. If somebody says you can put it on my property if you do X, I think we need to know that is all I'm saying.
Well, I can
That may
talk
factor into our analysis.
well, there's some suggestions that right away you'll see are simply not going to be relevant.
Understood.
But our job is to just recommend where we think it should go. You're adding a whole other layer of work, actually.
Actually, I'm really not. And well, all I'm saying is, if, for instance, if the cemetery said you could put it, let's say Elmwood said you could put it here, but you have to do X, Y, and Z in order
And
to.
that's up to the court to do. That's not part of our charge. It really is not. Wesley,
it is relevant to my assessment of. Excuse me, it is relevant to my assessment as to whether I would recommend that to the fiscal court. Yes, it is. It might not be relevant to you, Aloma, but it's relevant to me, and I would want.
It is not part of. It's just not part of what we're supposed to do, Tim. I understand you're a lawyer, and I really appreciate the fact that you question things. I taught my children to question everything, to question authority, to question everything, but it's very clear what we have been asked to do, and it may not. You want to do more, and I understand that, but that's not part of our charge.
Now, what I want to do, Aloma, is what we've been asked to do, and all I'm saying is we ought to make sure that when we come up with a place, that we understand the terms that the folks, who are opening up their property would attach to it, because that could affect whether we would finally recommend it or not. I mean, somebody comes with a list of crazy terms, even though we like the location.
But
my position would be we don't want it to be there.
But
right?
that's the job of the fiscal court. If we recommend spot A, then if they think spot A is a good place, they will talk to those people and see. I'm thinking of one place in particular where there will be some things that have to be taken care of, some maneuvering. But that is not for us. We don't have to, thank goodness, do that part. Wesley, did you have a comment or something? I thought I saw you. Did you have something to say?
No, someone walked in on me and I was
okay.
for them to go back.
I think once we get, and I will write this down, I will send it out to you, a timeline. What I need to know from you now, is there something else that needs to go on this timeline? Or is this going to get us where we want to go if we follow these steps? Minus the one that you want to take down. My feeling is that we do not have to wait until March the 3rd. I feel like, and I got the feeling from you, Kenny, that you felt that this could move along more quickly. It depends on how many comments we get. At this point, we've had about maybe 22, I think, comments. So it depends on how many we're getting in. We can move all this up, but I think once we work on the timeline, and I would like to work with you, Kenny, on kind of how that we want to do that, the times.
I believe if the action plan that you talked about kind of fits into the proposal, and like I said, I'm sorry that I didn't get to that to you quicker today, but I believe you could mesh that right into my proposal.
Okay.
Basically I'm
These
looking at,
seem like
deadlines.
the obvious steps. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And
the sooner we can get it taken care of, the better. But we want to be sure. And as the comments begin to dwindle off, that tells us something right there. So let's see how the comments come in. What have you all been hearing this week as you talk to people? Anybody having anybody give you any ideas?
No.
I've talked with a few people and have heard some things.
No.
No.
In people that I have just casually talked with, and I've told them to send their comments in, what I'm hearing more and more is Elmwood Cemetery. I will just tell you that's so far that has been the most responses, but it's certainly not going to be the only one. I want you all to be sure and look at this list that Jordan sent out of all of the Confederate monuments in the state and where they are, the number of them that are in cemeteries and the number that are in the process of being moved or have just been moved. Because I think that's important. That gives us some credence as to why that may be a good location. We've had kind of 22 comments, but before I move on to comments, what else about our action plan? Does that make sense how we're going to approach this? And Tim, the only thing I know to tell you is to talk again with the county attorney, because we have a very narrow thing that we have been asked to do. Very, very restricted. And that's all we've been asked.
Actually, what we have,
we're not supposed to.
It's actually very broad, respectfully. What it says is that, and I'm going to pull it up because I think it's important to talk about this. It says we will, that means we must, that's our obligation, recommend where to locate the monument. That says that's what we will do. Now the third section says we may consult with other groups. It does not say what else. And I'm absolutely going to do that. I think that's absolutely vital. But what it doesn't say is whether we can, think through logically. Does it make sense to put it there? Think through the question of who owns it. It doesn't say that. That it's absolutely incorrect to say that this document very narrowly says how to do our job. It says what our job is. It doesn't tell us how to do it.
Well, I think you're right that if we want to have speakers, whether it's somebody from the United Daughters or someone else come in, but we will need to, I will need to hear from you and run that by the whole committee when we're having a speaker, and then get that to Jordan in plenty of time before our meetings. I will, I think that it may be, I hadn't really thought about having speakers coming in, but I've got one at least that I'm going to read to you in a minute that I think might be a good idea. Okay, we're going to move on to the comments because all of you have read these, but 3 more came in just late this afternoon, and I have responded to those. One of the ones that came in suggested Elmwood. One was a very comprehensive note, but they didn't say where. And then we had one from a young man who thinks we should move it to Elkton, to the Jefferson Davis Monument. And I have told him for a number of reasons that would not work. But that is one of the thoughts that has come in. First of all, it would cost a fortune to move it down there. And I don't know that they would want it. We had one letter that went to the judge right after this all started, and I don't know whether he forwarded it to everybody, but I will get that out to you. It's from Jay Long, who was a librarian here at the Davis County Library for a very long time, very thoughtful man. And he has given it's a whole page as to why he thinks Elmwood Cemetery would be a good location. And one is that it's private property and there's Confederate soldiers buried there. And also says, like the Owensboro Museum, it's dedicated to the preservation of history. And whether he said it or someone else, it would also mean that could be included on the Voices of Elmwood tours. So it would be, and he may say that, but he talks about various things like the Confederate statue's creator. You all know George Julian Zolnay, very famous sculptor. His father-in-law and mother-in-law, the Gillums, are buried in Elmwood Cemetery. He married an Owensboro girl. And so, you know, that makes him an interesting person, frankly, to be on the Voices of Elmwood. It also would provide, according to him, kind of a compromise for both sides, because it would be a place of preservation. And I will send that email out to you all because it's very thoughtful, well thought out. And this is the kind of thing I'm hoping we get more of. Not just saying, this is where I think you should move it, but giving really thoughtful ideas about why. We've got another one. We've had, let's see, where's my little list? We have had one person write and want it moved to private property. They offered their property. We've had one person write and suggest that it should be at Sacramento, where that battle was. That's not in Davis County, however. And I believe when all this first started, somebody talked to the people with the Battle of Sacramento or the government over there, and they didn't want it. Panther Creek, the Battle of Panther Creek was the only battle in Davis County between regular Union and Confederate forces. And we have had 3 people suggest that as a possibility. And one of those people suggested that if it was taken there, and that land, there's a piece of land there that belongs to the United Daughters. And that was offered to them and they turned it down. My concern, Anne, with that location is that it might be vandalized. It's certainly appropriate that it be at that battle site. That was an important battle. But I would be concerned about security, but that is an option. We've had 3 people suggest the museum, and although the city said they don't want it, we'll be having change in administration. There certainly could be discussions, but I've had 8 people who have said, take it to Elmwood Cemetery. So that's the tally at this point. There's one letter that particularly you need to hear from, because this is from a woman who is a former student of mine, actually, but her name is Cynthia Evans, and she is the president of the Molly Moorhead chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And she makes an argument to move it to Elmwood Cemetery. So I think, to me, that goes a long way, because she is one of the daughters. She was opposed to moving it, but now that it is being moved, this was her suggestion. Trying to think if there are others that we particularly need to share on the meeting. A lot of people have just said, move it. It's like the people who said, don't move it. And they've not given any reasons or any place. One man wrote that he thought it should be moved from public property, but he was very concerned about the suggestion that it might be put over here on Frederica Street. Long as I draw a breath, that's not going to happen, because that's just got all kinds of problems with it. Another fella had suggested the Panther Creek battlefield site, and he gave reasons. Here's one for the History and Science Museum, another for the cemetery. And we had one, and this is the one, Kenny, that you responded to, a woman who lives over in Indiana now, but has ties with this area. And she felt that, I believe that she said the cemetery, but she definitely believes that it should be where she said it should be with the Confederate dead in the cemetery, which I would assume means Elmwood. Another for Elmwood. A lot of people have said educational context is important. one person asked a question, and I will tell you this so that you can answer if somebody asks you, wanted to know if it could be put on the November ballot. It cannot. It's not constitutional. This is not something that can be voted on. So that, I did respond to him, but that can't happen. A lot of people have said they want it placed where that, as an historical as an historical sculpture, it can be seen for that purpose, but not where it will be offensive. And then there were others that just move it. Had a response from a teacher at Owensboro High School who said that it was important to move it because felt that it was holding us back on being a diverse community. But then she wrote back and said Elmwood Cemetery was where that she thought it should go. So I think Cindy Evans and Jerry Long's particularly really well thought out on where they thought it should go. And now I've got a letter that I want to ask you all what you think we should do with. This is from a woman who has a downtown business across from the statue, and she wants to know where the funds are coming from. Well, now that the judge has talked, we know, and I can write her back and tell her that really was her concern, was where is the money going to come from? As a taxpayer, she didn't want it coming out of her taxes, which makes sense. Okay, have you all comments on any of these? You've read them all, so I don't need to read all of them to you, but I am, as I say, keeping the tally.
Well, like I said earlier, I've just been surprised there's been so little response.
Yeah, I really have too, Anne. I really thought there would be more. And in the beginning, there were quite a few of people saying, don't move it. No, that there were some kind of maybe kind of hateful comments, but that we're just disregarding those. That is not how we're going to spend our time. We are taking the comments for people who say, I think it should be moved to X spot, and this is why. And I think we will be having more, but you know, we go with what we've got. So I feel better having read the letters and seeing, and I really did feel that hearing from somebody with the Daughters of the Confederacy, it made me feel that we were moving along. Okay, we need to decide. Anybody else comments on the comments?
What's the crowd first?
Pardon?
As far as the Elmwood Cemetery, who makes that decision whether they would even accept it?
Well, the judge and the court, fiscal court, I think they may already have begun a discussion just to see if that is an option. And what I understand, they're talking about buying some lots in that section. There is a section, I actually think it's a section where my grave marker is, that's the kind of Confederate section. And they felt that would be a good location. And if the county decides, and whoever's paying for this, to buy a couple of lots, that's all they're interested in, is where they get the money.
So
it would be appropriate. And that's why I had you this list sent out to you of cemeteries, because cemeteries are where we honor the dead and where we honor people who mean a lot to us. And it is a place where people can go and contemplate and think about. And as I said, with Elmwood, with having the voices of Elmwood, that you've got a real good possibility there. But we don't know. We may get a whole lot for somewhere else, but that's where we are right now.
I kind of along the lines what Kim talked about. I'm a little confused about how we recommend something like Elmwood Cemetery to the fiscal court without even knowing that they would even accept it. Maybe they don't want it because they're afraid that vandalism or something might come. So that is not an action item that we're going to do at all. We just say.
That would be the same way with the museum. The city has said, because they own the building, they do not own the museum. We all own the museum, but they own the building. And they have said no. But that can be, you know, conversations can be had. But all the county wants us to do is pick out where we think would be good. And then they will take it from there. And I'm sorry, but that's what it is. Our job is.
I just don't think that that makes sense. I think if we're going to say, and frankly, assuming the county owns it, and I'm going to put that issue to rest in my mind. I'll talk to the judge offline. Now Loma, I'd like to finish my point. You've spoken a lot, and I'd like to finish my point. If I'm going to settle that issue, but assuming the county owns it, I think Elmwood's wonderful. I love that idea.
Yeah.
But I think it makes sense just practically before we go. I mean, as a lawyer, I make recommendations all the time, but I don't recommend them if I know that there's risk that they're not going to be willing to. So let's talk to Elmwood. Let's say, are you willing to do this? Or let's, whoever it is, might be someone else. That's all I'm saying. And I think Kenny's picked up on that too. It makes sense.
I hear what you're both saying, but I'm telling you, it is not part of what we are to do. Our job is simpler than you are making it. And I'm sorry, but I
really
discussed this at length. You may call the judge, you may call the county attorney and talk with them, but all we were asked to do was to recommend a place.
So we could recommend 3 places that practically have no possibility whatsoever. That's what you're telling us?
That is not the case.
Well, that's what you're telling us.
Well, no, that's not what I'm telling you, Tim. Look, if you want to argue in a court of law, that's fine. This is a committee of peers. And this committee has one
job. We're doing all the talking respectfully. And what we're trying to do is to work together, as you said, as a group.
That's right.
With some ideas. And all that Kenny and I are suggesting is that before we make a recommendation, we might want to understand if the place that we're recommending it would actually want to take it. I think that's entirely reasonable. That's not a legal, that's a common sense argument.
That's what I was.
If it's not about, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Go ahead, Ann.
I was just going to say, if it's not a viable recommendation, why are we spending all this time making recommendations?
It is viable. The court has thought about this. I think there have been inquiries made. It is as viable as the museum. What we have to do, the county has to decide how it's going to happen, how it's going to get there, they have to figure all that out. That's their job as a county court. Our job is to decide where we think it should go. That's it.
Let me ask a question, because I think it's relevant here. And obviously consensus is ideal, but what are the procedural rules? Let's say that, 3 of us decide that we think we should reach out to the places that we might like to see this go. What's the procedure on getting that done? Does somebody make a motion in a second? Like, what rules govern our committee?
The rules that govern our committee is that we follow what the court has asked us to do. I'm asking for procedure. No, you've been on boards. I've been on boards. You have procedural rules that say how you get business done. Somebody makes a motion, someone seconds it. There's discussion. You vote on it. You vote it down. You vote it up. Whatever. That's what I'm asking. Because I think we can all issue our opinion, but I think at some point we'll have to decide whether we want to do certain things, and that's what I'd like to know is how we do that. Then what you're saying is we should vote on whether or not the county owns it. And that's not an option. And you've been told that.
That's really not. And the issue of whether the county owns it, County Attorney Porter sent out an email, as you know, and he said the court speaks only through its formal writings. And you heard Judge Mattingly today say that it's kind of a sticky question about ownership. I'm not taking a position on who owns it, but I am going to satisfy that in my mind because it's relevant. Personally, I have no dog in the fight. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter to me. I would never join the UDC. The fact of the organization, I'm not a big fan of keeping that, perpetuating that. My grandmother was in a Nazi labor camp, so I understand that there's, sensitivity around all this. But I was asked to do a job, and the job I was asked to do was to recommend where it needs to go. And if we've got somebody making a claim on it, then I at least owe it to myself to, look into that. And I very well may conclude, like the judge suggested, that, the county owns it. But I'm going to follow up with him. You raised that now. I wasn't going to bring that up again, but I'm going to follow up with him, like he said. But I don't think that has anything to do with the other issue we were talking about, which is making sure that we know that the place that the thing would go would be willing to take it. I think that's totally relevant.
Let me talk to the judge, or you certainly may call him, and clarify that. But my understanding is that is not part of our charge. I think I understand what you're saying, but right now, the court just wants to know what the public wants. Now, whether that actually will happen, I guess does depend on whether the cemetery approves, or the museum approves, or the United Daughters approve of having it out in Panther Creek, because those seem to be the three big things right now. So let's table this until the next meeting, and let me check and get some material for you. Lord, we've been going on a long time. I think what we need to do now is decide on our next meeting. We do not need to meet weekly. We can meet every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, whichever most you all think. I kind of tend to think maybe every 2 weeks. And I think that instead of every meeting deciding, we need to decide on a set meeting day. And that way we'll mark our calendars and we'll all know when it's going to be.
Aloma, do we want to go ahead and adopt the kind of timelines that you had, or are we just going to pass that to the next time? Because you did, I think that's a good idea, but I don't know that we ever actually finished that.
Well, good point, Tim. We probably should. I was going to send it out to all of you all in the form of an email, but we do need, and that's why I asked, did anybody have any other suggestions for the timeline? But I need to get all this written up and out to you.
I would like to suggest the first timeline is a deadline for the consideration of proposals.
Okay.
I think that's something we need to have. And that would actually energize the community to move on with this and realize they have a point. And personally, I think 2 weeks is what I'm thinking. That by next meeting, we've collected all the proposals that we are going to consider. It may be too soon. I just starting point for see what everybody else thinks.
Well, I definitely think the deadline is a good idea. I think we probably ought to give them a little more than 2 weeks. I don't know. What do the rest of you think?
I was kind of thinking 3 weeks.
I was thinking a month.
2 or 3.
You were thinking what, Tim?
I was thinking a month. I mean, a month is nice. We got 6 months. We're into it by 2 or 3 weeks. A month gives us, a fair amount of time before the holidays. And then, but I'm open. It does, whatever.
Well, I agree with you. A month seems a reasonable time, but we'll need to decide if we can all agree on that, or if we need to vote on it. Wesley, what do you think?
I was just thinking, when we do make a recommendation, would we have already talked to the person where we are recommending it, whether they would accept it or not?
That's what I'm going to check on, and we're going to table that till next meeting, because my understanding is that we're not even to do that. We're just to say, this is where we think it should go, and then the court has to do all the logistics. But I think that since that is a question that all of you have brought up, that it needs to be dealt with. So I would like to have that tabled until our next meeting, and then we can go into that if that.
I agree with that.
And I'm just asking for consensus rather than votes, because there are only 5 of us.
I agree.
Agree.
It's fine.
Okay. Well, and I will get on to that immediately tomorrow. So what about having do you think we should meet as often as every 2 weeks? If we're going to set a deadline, maybe we should.
Well, as long as this meeting has lasted, I think maybe we should go every 2 weeks, because I can't imagine going 4 weeks.
Yeah, this has been way too long, I've got to say. Okay, how about Wednesday, October 14th? Look at your calendars if you've got them handy.
I thought Wednesday was a problem for somebody.
Was it?
Yeah, Wesley, it was a problem.
Yeah,
for me.
It's not a
Oh,
problem.
Wednesday's a problem for you. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not a problem for me. I can meet on that day if it's agreeable to the others.
But
But
you
I was
said it was a
thinking-
problem for you, Ann?
No, I just said it was a problem with
okay.
Wesley.
It just seemed the middle of the week seemed like maybe a good time. All right, look at your calendars and see if Wednesday, October 14th, October 28th, and November 11th. Those are 2 weeks apart. And at that point, we can reassess and see how far we've come. I think that seems reasonable to me. Pardon?
I just said all of those work for me, fine.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jim.
Good for me.
Good for me.
Good for me.
Okay, then we will send all of that out. Now, anybody have any other comments before we take a motion to adjourn?
I have something very important before you adjourn. If you
Okay,
can hold on just 1 second.
okay.
Was it Wednesday at 4:30 is what we were doing?
Oh, we didn't decide on a time. I was wondering if 5 would be better.
Not with me.
I think, Tim, you have to get to and from work. I think the rest of us are retired, so it's really you and Kenny. If
No, I'm
4:30
working from
works-
home. I'm working from home, so
Oh.
anytime works. Anytime in the
Well,
afternoon or evening.
Do you want to keep it at 4:30?
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Talking about the important things in life.
oh, that is one of the important, in fact, that's why we're all doing this, for the future. And I really want to thank all of you all. This is not easy work. And I hope, Tim, that you and I can be friends, even if we disagree about things, because
Oh, sure,
you've got
yeah.
a sharp mind and I appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
I promise by next meeting, I will have an answer one way or the other, and then we can go from there. But right now, just keep up with the emails. Let's keep a count and see what's going on. I will get all this together and I type it up and I'll have Jordan send it out to all of you. Does that work?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Pardon?
Hold on a second.
Yes, okay.
Real quick, I might have missed something. I lagged there a while ago.
Oh, okay.
Did we set a deadline for the proposals?
We have not yet, and I wonder if we should wait and see till next call when we have more, see how many come in. What do you think?
That's fine with me.
I'm-
That makes sense, because we might start seeing
Yeah,
a bigger
but
flow.
I definitely think setting the deadline should be on next time's call.
Okay, and if you don't mind, see if you can't work that action plan in my proposal somehow.
I will, yes, I certainly will.
Okay,
I'll download that tonight.
all right,
And thank you for doing that.
no problem.
Thank you all. And Ann, I hope you'll stay with us. We need that different viewpoint. And I think all of us, the viewpoint is we just want to do what's best for Davis County. And that's what we're going to try to do. So bye-bye. Okay, do we vote for adjournment or do we just leave?
I motion to
I think-
adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Okay. Thank you all so much. Talk to you later.